We are looking at the two bikes from Engwe, two 750 watt fat tyre 20-inch e-bikes, the EP-2 Pro and the Engine Pro. We've got them side by side. We're not going to go for a ride or anything like that. It's just a visual, see what's similar and see what's different. So let's go on, have a look right away. So first, what's similar? Well, as I've said already, the wheels and the tyres are very similar. They're both 4-inch thick fat tyres, 20-inch diameter. The Engine Pro, this is the Engine Pro. The Engine Pro's brand, I can find them, is Chow Yang. There you go. Whereas the EP-2 Pro uses these Panaracer's Fat Bee Nimbles. They both have metal mudguards. They do sound slightly different. They've both got locking front suspension. You can adjust the preload on the Engine Pro, and there is some kind of adjuster here that's, I think it's meant to be preload, but I can't really tell the difference. And I haven't actually ridden this bike yet, the Engine 2 Pro. I'm about to do the first impressions of that very soon. So if you want to see my first impressions on that bike, do subscribe so you don't miss that one. I've already done a first impressions of this one, the EP-2 Pro, and a full review of it, and it's a lovely bike. And if this is meant to be a step down from that, then I am looking forward to testing that one. So what else is the same? They both have that same folding fat tyre format, and they also have the same very comfortable saddle. So what's different then? Now it is worth noting that this is the original EP-2 Pro. There is now an upgraded version, and the way you can tell the difference between the upgraded version is the new one has a sticky out front bit, and I can explain it better by going over to the Engine Pro and showing you that. That's what it has. So the new EP-2 Pros do have this. The old EP-2 Pros have a 12.8 amp hour battery inside there, whereas the new ones have a slightly bigger 13 amp hour battery inside there. But the Engine Pro has a 16 amp hour battery. Now that equates to quite a bit of extra range. The Engine Pro can go 120 kilometers. The EP-2 Pro can go about 80 kilometers. Now let's have a look at the gearing. The EP-2 Pro uses the Shimano Tourney gear set, or Tourney, which is 6 speeds on the cassette there, whereas the Engine Pro uses the Shimano Altus gear set, which is generally a better gear set than the Tourney. Tourney is okay, it's their entry-level gear set, but Altus is better. When it comes to the gear levers, the EP-2 Pro uses this SAS gear lever, which basically involves pressing a button to make it go up a gear, and then pushing the stick around to make it go back down a gear, which generally I quite like. The Engine Pro uses this, which I could be wrong about this, I'm not an expert on gears, but I think this might be an STI gear lever, which involves using this thumb to go down, and then behind here is another lever which goes up through the gears. So down through the gears, up through the gears. Now let's look at the brakes. Now the EP-2 Pro uses mechanical disc brakes. There's that wire there. The Engine Pro uses hydraulic disc brakes, so you can't see that little bit of wire flopping out. Here's the brake tube there, but there's nothing coming out of it because it's all self-contained. What's the difference? Well, generally you want to have hydraulic disc brakes if you've got a really powerful engine because they're stronger. To use mechanical disc brakes, you pull that, it pulls the lever down here, grabbing the disc and slowing you down. The problem with this is you've got to pull it quite hard in order to pull the brake harder. Mechanical disc brakes, on the other hand, basically pull it a bit and it's going to be pulling it really strong for you. You don't have to be Superman to stop your bike, so it's really nice, and that feels really nice as well. These mechanical brakes and the handles on the Engwe EP-2 Pro are fine, but these are just really nice, like that. The Engwe EP-2 Pro uses a twist throttle, whereas the Engine Pro uses a thumb throttle on the left. One isn't better than the other, it all just depends on which one you prefer. The EP-2 Pro does not have a buzzer, it just has a bell. But the Engine Pro has a buzzer. The EP-2 Pro has a black and white, albeit very nice computer, whereas the Engine Pro has an even nicer colour computer. The handlebar stem appears to use a different method, whereas this one, pull that up and pull it down, and then that flops down like that. So the main latch is this piece here, whereas on the Engine Pro you pull it out on the other side and this is going to come out. Oh, it's still got a latch there, and you can see the mechanism here. So pull that, press that up, pull that down. It's hard to do this with one hand. Oh, there we go. Ah, you can see that come out, and then it flops over like that. So that's what's keeping it up. That gets tightened into there. The lights, slightly different. We can turn it on. There we go. And here's the engine ones. Let's find the button. There it is. Side by side. I don't know if you can tell, but the EP-2 Pro has a more of a white, colder light, whereas the Engine Pro has more of a warmer halogen style light. I'm not saying it is halogen, it's probably still LED, but that's just what it looks like. Big difference on these bikes is the EP-2 Pro has a hardtail, whereas the Engine Pro has rear suspension. The EP-2 Pro has a small standard rear luggage rack which I've attached a saddle to, which my son gets on, whereas the Engine Pro has this really big chunky thing which you'd imagine would carry more. However, my 6-year-old son does ride on that and he's not small, so it is pretty strong. The pedals on the EP-2 Pro are these type of half metal, half plastic rubber folding pedals, which are fine. But the pedals on the Engine Pro are these much chunkier, nicer metal pedals with little grooves on there for grip. We'll see how well they actually compare when I try it. And then to fold these with one hand, you're just going to push it and pull it down like that. The rear stand on the EP-2 Pro is a normal bike stand, as you'd expect on any bike. However, the Engine Pro has got this really nice chunky thing, which currently isn't touching the floor because I've leaned it against the fence to make a thumbnail. But that's a really nice stand, that is. Now this might not be a regular difference, but you look at the EP-2 Pro, you can see how this bar that comes from the fenders, or mudguard as you might call it, connects like that, as you would expect on a bike. However, when I was putting it together, it was not the same on the Engine Pro. So that there, the connector comes straight out of the fork. So this, if we go back to the EP-2 Pro, that is straight, parallel with the wire. Whereas you can see this one bends around to attach to it. Another difference is the nuts that connect that keep the front wheel onto the forks. If you look at this, the front forks of the EP-2 Pro has a hole in it, so they can use this kind of hook thing that hooks into that hole. So if ever this got a bit loose to the point that this wanted to fall off, that hook would actually keep the wheel onto the forks. Now, I've actually had an accident before where a really old bike of mine, these came loose and it actually fell off while I was riding it. Now luckily it was slow and it was fine, but ever since then I've been a bit paranoid. Now here we are with the Engine Pro again. Putting it together, I noticed that did not have it. It's just a simple nut and bolt. They've both got the same max load of 330 pounds, and in terms of weight, now it's actually quite hard to find the manufacturer's weight, and I haven't weighed them myself, but the Engine Pro is down as 31.6 kilograms, and what I found for the EP2 Pro was 32 kilograms, which can't be right, because the rear suspension system is going to add a bit of weight for that, plus the chunky luggage rack, that's going to add a bit of weight surely. So I'd imagine whatever they weigh, the Engine Pro is probably about half to a kilogram more, but not really much, maybe a tiny bit more. Now, one thing that people might wonder is if they're both 750 watts, why does it always seem like the Engine Pro is a faster bike than the Engwe EP-2 Pro? Both go 45 kilometers per hour, about 28 miles per hour, but they've also given us the torque in Newton meters. Now, funnily enough, the torque of the EP2 Pro is 80 Newton meters. The torque given of the Engine Pro is only 55 Newton meters. That's quite a lot less torque, and obviously when I'm riding it, me being close to 100 kilograms, I could do with it having as much torque as possible. I know the EP2 Pro is a brilliant bike, and I can wholeheartedly recommend that